Hey, before I start, I have something to admit. I don't know who Jerma is. At least, I didn't used to know who he was, until this one day around 2 months ago when I woke up in the middle of the night, collapsed at my desk with my computer running beside me. I had this massive headache and could barely make sense of my surroundings. I just felt so dizzy and lost. But then I heard this music coming out of my speakers and saw that my computer had launched this strange video game which I had never seen or heard of before. Its title read, Jerma's Big Adventure. And for some inexplicable reason, it was credited to me. But that made no sense. I had no memory of anything like it. So to investigate further, I went ahead and tried playing it. What a huge mistake. It starred this strange little man that I assumed at the time had to be a fictional character. He would make these inhuman noises and perform these bizarre cartoonish motions. Beyond anything, the project was just confusing and annoying. My headache was just getting worse with each second I played it. I had to step away from my computer just to breathe. But when I opened my phone to check the time, I came to a horrifying realization. I had no recollection of the last 6 months of my life. Gone. And presumably in some sort of unhinged fugue state where I lost all my better judgment and sense of self-respect, I must have developed this project. But why? Why did this happen? Why did I make this? What is the purpose of this project? What does it all mean? Who's Jerma? With these questions burning in my mind, I set off on a mission to dissect the game, discover its secrets, and learn how and why I created Jerma's Big Adventure. Here's what I found out. Jerma985, pictured here, is an American video game streamer and internet personality. Based on what I gathered from the game and its marketing material, he appears to be best known for his famous Spee video, where he talks in a funny voice over footage of the 2007 hit multiplayer first-person shooter Team Fortress 2. Admittedly, it's a very nice video. But aside from the Spee video, Jerma985 does a wide variety of stunts and gags performed in front of a live audience. One such stunt involved the streamer recording himself for several hours in a green screen studio where he acted out unusual situations and dressed up in silly costumes. And here was the source of the game's visuals. Here's how I think it went. For each animation, the process begins with a desperate search through the endless stream of nonsense found in the videos. For the most part, I needed footage where Jerma's whole body from head to toe was visible on camera and within the green backdrop. I also tried to keep some level of consistency between the animations so that they would blend together well in game. To illustrate the process, I'll add this funny Jerma dance into the game. To start, I grabbed the already keyed out and cropped footage generously prepared by YouTube user Ubre. I then load the footage into Premiere Pro, where I apply the Ultra Key effect and export every single frame from the footage into individual PNG files. Out of context of the project, this resulted in what would be a concerning amount of Jerma images accumulated across the project. After exporting the frames, I then select the specific few frames I want to form my animation. I kept the amount of frames I used in an animation limited for both practical and stylistic reasons. On the practical side, it allowed me to more easily loop the animations and gave me wiggle room to select and modify the individual frames to suit my needs. On the stylistic side of things, I thought it looked funny, and I liked it. After selecting the frames I want in the animation, I would then go through each and every frame and manually clean up or adjust the images, usually at least erasing any shadows. From here, I would import the newly created sprite sheet into the game engine used to create the project, Unity. By setting the pivot point of all the sprites to consistently be between Jerma's feet, I was able to easily construct animations using Unity's built-in tools. Here you can see this wacky new dance in action as one of the possible animations Jerma can play while telling a joke. Isn't that neat? To go with this new joke animation, let's add a new Jerma joke audio line into the game.
Is it like a currency?
As I seemed to be unaware during development of the existence of pre-compiled libraries of Jerma audio, I searched for all the audio in the game manually and painfully. For the Jerma jokes, I needed audio clips that were brief, recognizable, and didn't feature excessive background noise. The background noise issue was a consistent problem in searching for audio, as Jerma often plays video games on his streams. For this example, I'll select this clip of Jerma saying the name Aaron in a funny voice. This particular instance of the Jerma joke was prompted by some weirdo in his chat begging him to say it.
Say it, please, I beg you. All right. Aaron! 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 Aaron!
Very funny. Now that we know the origin of the stunning visuals and audio for the characters, let's discuss gameplay. Jerma's Big Adventure is a 2D action platformer with fairly simple combat and platforming mechanics. To handle movement and collision, the game uses a manual raycast-based platformer controller based on a tutorial by the wonderful Unity game dev, Sebastian Lague. His videos are very nice. A raycast is a feature that checks to see if any colliders intersect with a line and returns information about the intersection and the hit collider. A raycast controller just shoots out a bunch of these raycasts to see where a character can safely move without collisions. This system has an advantage over a more straightforward physics-based controller, as it gives more fine precision over the control and handles things like slopes very well. Along with the ability to move, the game features a variable length jump, which also includes a common platformer feature called Coyote Time, named after that one gag in Looney Tunes, where it takes a bit before gravity kicks in and the coyote falls down. I like that gag. In platformers, Coyote Time is when, after the player moves off a platform, there is a small window of time when they can still perform a jump even though they are no longer grounded. The game just feels better to play this way. You don't feel cheated out on missing a jump. Aside from running and jumping, the game has a number of other mechanics. There is a duck and roll mechanic where Jerma contorts his body into a ball and rolls around at high speeds. It was inspired by the 2D Metroid games, despite the fact I've never actually played them. Originally, there was going to be limitations on how long you could roll, and you wouldn't have been able to jump while rolling. But rolling is fun, so I removed those limitations. The game plays a trombone sound when you duck, and a drum roll when you roll, to imitate the instrument sound effects used in early cartoons. This was done because Jerma is a cartoon character. Jerma also has a basic 3-part combo attack he performs with his trusty baseball bat. Jerma can use this bat to hit things. The bat also knocks enemies up into the air to allow for attacks to be stringed together for some cool gamer moments. The bat can also be used to reflect enemy projectiles in 3 possible directions. These projectile-based interactions were meant to be the heart of this overall very simple combat system. It was based on the mechanics of another game I've never played before, called Lethal League. There is also the joke mechanic I mentioned earlier, which is part of a larger effort in the game to incorporate elements of Jerma's live streams into the gameplay. Throughout his adventure, Jerma is shown to be putting on some sort of performance for a live audience. The audience, which is a stand-in for Jerma's own Twitch chat, can react positively or negatively to a number of Jerma's actions, depending on if they liked them or not. Along with their comments appearing on screen, the audience can even be heard cheering or booing or laughing, with audio clips taken from Adobe Audition's free sound effect library, which for some reason happen to contain a lot of pirate laugh sounds. Their reactions also cause a change in the seemingly useless score kept throughout the game, called funnies. The largest factor in changing the funny score is the Jerma jokes. As Jerma hits things like enemies and crates, a meter fills up with some sort of joke fuel that can be used once a certain threshold is passed. The Jerma joke system also serves as the main healing mechanism in the game, as Jerma is rather fragile in the game with only 6 health points. The player can use the joke meter to restore Jerma's broken body. This healing mechanic, based around a meter that increases after attacking enemies, is taken directly from the game Hollow Knight, which I did actually play a little of. However, the final and objectively worst main mechanic was an original creation not really inspired by any game in particular. If Jerma is falling down next to a ledge, rather than directly grabbing onto the ledge, he sort of just sticks his arms out, which land on the platform, allowing him to boost jump off of it. In practice, this is pretty awkward and clunky, but it looks kind of funny, and it is something I can call my own. But what would all these brilliant mechanics be without some adversaries to challenge you? The game features a wide variety of 2 main enemy types, the Jerma Raptor and the Shock Warlock. The Raptors, for some reason, fire out lasers that explode on contact with any surface and deal damage. The Warlocks fire out electric orbs that shock characters and can bounce off of surfaces or be hit a set number of times before they shatter. Both enemy types try to maintain a certain distance from Jerma so that they can fire their projectiles. They also have behavior they perform when they are cornered into an obstacle by the player. The Raptors will jump into the air, knocking back the player as they hit them, in an attempt to gain some space to continue attacking. The Warlocks will perform a special attack where they fire a large electrical blast directly in front of them to knock back the player. Warlocks also launch this electrical blast if you try to hit them directly, which encourages the player to first shock them before attacking. There was definitely room for improvement with the final state of combat in the game. The best strategy was often to stand at a large distance and just wait to reflect projectiles until you win, which isn't exactly the most engaging experience. Some shifts around in AI and additional enemy types could go a long way in improving the combat. There is actually one other, larger enemy in the game with more complex behavior, but I'll talk about that one a bit later. First, I need to address one of the major questions I imagine you'd have after hearing this breakdown of the gameplay. Why is the game like this? Assuming the goal was to make a fan game surrounding Jerma 985, this gameplay feels really random. Nothing about his streams really calls for a combat platformer to be made around him. And more puzzling than that, Why did I decide the two enemy types would be a laser-shooting dinosaur and an electric ball-shooting wizard? How do either of those things relate at all to Jerma? Well, the truth is, this entire game was ripped directly from something completely unrelated. My large-scale game project, currently in development, called Wombat. What is Wombat? Well, that's a story for another day. What's relevant here is that Wombat jumps between multiple game genres, including a 2D action platformer section where the titular character, Wombat, faces off against a legion of deadly laser-shooting robots. Clearly, Jerma's Big Adventure took nearly all the mechanics and enemy AI developed for this part of Wombat and slapped on Jerma sprites and audio. But what led me to put my main project on hold for so long? What was so important and special about this Jerma reference game for it to take precedence over Wombat? To understand what motivations led me here, I decided to examine the aspects that were unique to Jerma's Big Adventure. First, there's the story. In the game, Jerma, well, the story is... Actually, let's skip the plot for now and talk about the levels and overall structure of the game. The game opens above ground on some sort of grassy hill. The visuals in this one section are significantly better than the rest of the game, as they were ripped from a free Unity sample project. I still constructed the scene, but I'm definitely not able to draw these sprites myself. In this region, and underground, a parallax effect is used in the background to give depth. All that this parallax effect really does is move a sprite as the camera moves, but at a slower rate. In this above ground section, Jerma frolics down a meadow while telling jokes, oblivious to the constant stream of warning signs directly in front of him. He then willingly jumps down a 150,000 foot deep pit, which breaks his body, all for a cheap fall joke gag that one person liked. This opening where the protagonist falls down a deep pit and ends up in a mystical new world was of course based on the popular, critically acclaimed video game, Majora's Mask. Down in the cave system, you can see the one rock texture that makes up like 90% of this game's visuals, which was also taken from a default Unity sample. There's also these giant mushrooms I made, which were originally supposed to be placeholders, but I sort of just left them in. Everything in the background of the cave was rendered on a separate camera and then blurred with post-processing to bring attention to the foreground. In general, Unity's post-processing effects did a lot of the heavy lifting and making the game look decent enough with such limited art. The game's platforms were made using Unity's 2D sprite shape system, which allowed for quick editing and also automatically generated colliders based on the terrain. In terms of the actual layout, the entire cave system is part of one continuous Unity scene, with enemies and crates enabled selectively depending on what region you're in. The caves begin with some brief tutorials, some more elegantly designed than others. After that, the game is made up of little regions divided by tunnels that Jerma rolls through. I also implemented a checkpoint system in each region that functions as both a way to load saves and as a respawning point for the player. Jerma's death sequence was easily one of the most entertaining things to develop. At least, I think it was, as I was in a fugue state, remember? The instant Jerma dies, dramatic music with a humming choir instantly kicks in as Jerma's body either flings through the air, slides on the ground, or just instantly collapses. The text and the graphic that appear seem to be a reference to some game. Not sure though. What really made this system fun to develop was the dedicated Die Instantly button I used while testing. This button also works in cutscenes, which made it very fun.
Loot yet?
After Jerma clears through all the main combat regions, he has one more major obstacle to overcome before the dramatic final battle. The most dangerous obstacle of them all: gambling. And here's where you can see how twisted and out of control I must have been while developing this project. Due to Jerma's history with gambling minigames on his stream, I added a fully functional slot machine where players could gamble away all of their funnies. The machine, however, was completely rigged. Here's what I think happened. After deciding to add a slot machine into the game, I drew up a number of popular symbols like fruits, diamonds, and sevens, and added them to 3 reels. It took a while to line everything up right and get my shader working for the reel's 3D effect it has when it spins. But during all of this, I sort of forgot how a slot machine works, and realized that the reel would make absolutely no sense if the machine just randomly spun until it landed somewhere. In that case, all symbols would have an equal chance of getting 3 in a row. I didn't want to go back and redo things, so I decided I'd just handle everything manually through code and predetermine exactly what 3 symbols each reel would land on, and then spin it to the right position. But then I realized something. I had control. I could make the machine work however I desire. Here's what I did. No matter what, on their first spin, the player always wins with 3 fruits. This first one is the hook, a taste of success. For all subsequent spins, winning spins have a fairly distributed chance for their relative worth. However, each probability is multiplied by an extra factor called the rig multiplier. This factor follows a carefully tuned curve based on the total amount of funnies you have. The player is always capable of winning despite the rig multiplier, which is intended to mislead them and give them a sense of false hope. The machine also gives out a higher number of near wins with 2 out of the 3 symbols, to further mess with the player. The goal is that the player gets stuck in an infinite loop of seemingly being on a winning streak before losing it all and almost never being able to surpass a certain threshold of funnies. The machine also ensures that this infinite loop can continue indefinitely by giving the player a single +2 if they lose all of their funnies. The cherry on top of this cruel package is that the hyperactive casino music track in the background slowly increases in pitch the longer you stay there. Truly, this was the work of an unhinged psychopath, and not something someone as reasonable and good-spirited as myself would make. If the player makes it past the casino, they are met with a truly frightening beast. Spoiler warning. The giant enemy dinosaur. The giant dino acts as the culmination of the mechanics shown before in the game. The player learned from before how electric orbs function, and that they can reflect them back to shock the enemy. This time, however, the giant dino will reflect back the orb right back at you, and you have to continue reflecting it until the dino can't react in time and gets shocked. This mechanic was mainly inspired by the Ganondorf fights in the Zelda series. The giant dino's hammer swing attack actually works the same as the player's bat swing attack, in that all the same things the player can hit, the giant dino can hit as well. This means the giant dino is able to destroy crates, hit signs, reflect laser projectiles, and even hit his own summoned minion raptors. The ability for the giant dino to punt his fellow dinosaurs into the air was inspired by how moblins in Breath of the Wild would throw the smaller bokoblins in the air, which I thought was very funny. In general, the giant dino's behavior ended up being pretty complicated and time-consuming to develop, but I think the fight turned out pretty well, especially with the added chaos of the summoned raptors. In order to actually defeat the dino, Jerma needs to first break down his shield, which exposes his weak point and stuns him, allowing for quick follow-up attacks. This system of exposing a boss's weak point to deal damage was taken from the Zelda series. I like Zelda games. The giant dino then explodes because it's a robot or something. I don't know. And this brings us to the dramatic conclusion, where Jerma learns the truth and all the secrets of the game's story are revealed. Finally, with this information, I can understand the deeper meaning and purpose behind this project. I can get some closure on why I dedicated all this time to this game and put my main project on hold for it. Here we go. It's revealed that the Warlock was actually Jerma's great-grandfather. He reveals the cave system was actually a trial designed for Jerma, and now that he's cleared it, he has the choice to either learn a shocking truth about his family or get some potato chips. The player is prompted with a choice to swing Jerma's bat. However, this actually doesn't matter, and the three possible endings are instead determined by how many funnies you end up with. In the average and worst endings, Jerma murders the Warlock and goes to take the chips. In the worst ending, Jerma decides there's one last thing he wants to do before ending his adventure, and heads back to his old friend, the slot machine. The following cutscene has Jerma stuck in an infinite loop of playing slots while the camera zooms out, leaving the audience to stop and reflect on the effects of gambling. Clearly, this game has a powerful message on the dangers of gambling. Well, except for the fact that the player can use gambling to get the best ending just by getting lucky and winning enough, which, sort of ruins that message. If the meaning is not in the worst ending, maybe it can only really be discovered in the game's secret psycho ending. The game features a difficulty mode called Psycho Mode, which features a remixed environment and heightened enemy AI. The game reframes the adventure as Jerma being an unhinged psychopath, going on a rampage, and if you make it to the ending, Jerma instantly slaughters the Warlock and successfully gets the chips. Which I guess means that his brutal rampage paid off. Well, that's not really a great message either. Maybe instead, the game's meaning can be found in the average ending. Here, Jerma approaches the chips, but then hits them with his bat, and then the earth explodes, and then a spaceship appears with a cat head, and then there are aliens inside. Maybe instead, the game's meaning can only truly be found in the best ending. Here, the Warlock stops Jerma's attack and reveals the shocking secret. Jerma had just stumbled into his very own surprise birthday bash, and his whole family was waiting. They celebrate and dance, and the credits roll. So this must be what ties together the game. Let's make sense of this. These characters called the Birthday Rats can also be seen hidden throughout the game, in many cases just right out of view of Jerma. In one of their secret hideouts, however, you can find a whole group of them, alongside their leader, the Big Rat. They scurry away, but further investigation reveals a pile of birthday party hats and a sign saying, "Party Planning Room." With this connection, it appears that the Birthday Rats planned Jerma's surprise party, and that the rats scattered throughout the game were on some sort of lookout duty to make sure that Jerma was heading in the right direction and to prepare for the party reveal. So there you go, the plot all comes together. In some sort of bizarre family tradition, Jerma's great times whatever grandfather forced him to go through a trial against an army of robot dinosaurs, and I guess the warlock's own magic clones or something? And at the end, the reward was a surprise birthday party organized by a bunch of rats. So clearly, the game's story represents, when you look at the symbolism behind the journey, the purpose was, Wait a minute. This is all nonsense, isn't it? This game's stupid. What have I done? All those days wasted. Not only that, but people have played this. It was published on Steam. My name and reputation are permanently tied to this thing. What led me to do this? Where did all my memories go? What happened to me? Who's Jerma? Well, can't do anything about it now. All I've got left is this vague memory from before it all went blank. I was walking home late at night, minding my own business, but I bumped into something. I looked down, like way down, and saw this hooded figure. I could barely make out his face, but I could see he had this massive, inhuman smile stretching across his face. His whole presence just felt really suspicious. But after that encounter, it's all blank, all the way up until that fateful day when I woke up with the completed game. Or maybe that was a dream or something, I don't know. Regardless, I made this game. This game exists now, and that's that. Even though I failed to find any answers through this journey, I'll leave you with my findings. If you think you have any idea what this game means, or how any of this happened to me, I'd love to know. Also, I'll share some of the resources created during development in the video description, like all of the Jerma sprite sheets and Jerma audio lines. One thing I did realize through this investigation is that I really need to take a step back and change my approach to game development. I can't let something like this happen again. So in my next investigative video, I'll take the first step in mastering the art of game design by attempting to define and create an objectively perfect video game. Anyways, thanks for watching, and if you liked this video, thanks. I like you too. Bye.
Warbill? Warbrill? Yeah, Warbler. Warbler. Warbler.